Good afternoon. This is Tuesday, March 29th for your daily weather briefing. We're doing this in the afternoon today. We wanted to take a look at today's weather and tomorrow's weather as we've got a potential severe weather event the next couple of days. So let's get started and look at current weather across the United States of America today. And as you can see right now, really not a lot happening along the west coast here as high pressure is now beginning to move into the northwest, and temperatures not too bad right now across Washington with temperatures in the mid 60s all the way up to the mid 50s. And then we've got a big storm system out here in the Intermountain West, so we've got quite a bit of snow showers and showers extending all the way from the California coast all the way through Nevada, Salt Lake City into Wyoming with some winter storm watches and warnings there. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. Pretty deep low pressure system forming over here of the southeastern portion of Colorado with a strong southerly flow out ahead of that in the warm sector. Some temperatures really getting up there around the mid to upper 80s out there by Carlsbad, New Mexico. As we got a good southerly flow here, and we'll begin to see the moisture increase also. And then a little bit further towards the east here, we can see the warm front producing some showers and thunderstorms out here in the northern portion of Iowa. But mostly generally over the Midwest, the temperatures are relatively decent. They're cool in the mid 50s mostly and low 40s. Temperatures a little colder in Canada. Northeast continues to be wanting to be in spring, but temperatures are in the low to mid 30s there. And then the southeast is quite toasty with an interesting little disturbance moving across Florida. We'll take a look at that in visual satellite here in just a moment. Now, looking at the watch warning map, not a lot happening along the east at this point. Several flash flood watches are now in effect for portions of Alabama, Mississippi, southern Arkansas, and northern Louisiana right now in effect for the rain that's going to be coming up over the next couple of days. We also have several fire weather watches now in effect for portions of Oklahoma, portions of the panhandle of Texas, down in the western portion of Texas, with red flag advisories in effect for red flag warnings in effect for windy conditions, as well as a very high fire danger. We have wind advisories across most of northern Arizona and northern New Mexico, and portions of southeastern Arizona. And then back above that, we have a winter weather advisory out here in the western portions or eastern portions of California. Central and northern portions of Nevada have winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings, and then several winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings across Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. So we got quite a bit going into the west with this storm system. Let's take a look at this storm on satellite. Again, quite interesting, a little disturbance moving across portions of Florida at this point. This is not a warm core, obviously, but it's kind of an interesting little disturbance there. We got some outflow aloft associated with that, with this little storm that's moving across. Quite a bit of moisture here along the Gulf Coast. Now, it's kind of interesting. We need to look at this a little bit here a little bit later, and I thought it was interesting. We got quite a bit of convection beginning to form off out here across the Gulf of Mexico. This may come into play a little bit later tomorrow and the next day when it comes to the severe weather events, because if we get too much convection down here along the Gulf, that's going to shut off the flow up to the north, and even though this is going to be a pretty potent storm system, it's going to reduce the inflow of storms further up to the north, and therefore we could have a reduced severe weather risk. But obviously, a lot of moisture now beginning to flow into this storm system. It's moving into the southwestern portion of the United States. And looking into the western portion of the United States, you can see this classic comma-shaped cloud, very strong storm system. Up level low pretty much over Utah at this point in time. A lot of snow and rain showers out here in this area. A lot of snow being dropped at this point. So a very classic spring type storm into the west here. Looking at the current radar at this point, we see all that precipitation in the Intermountain West. A little bit of thunderstorm activity along the warm front from about Sioux Falls, South Dakota, down to just a little bit north of Des Moines, Iowa. And then we've got that convection off here, the Gulf California coast. Some of these storms are pretty potent, actually. Running about 60, 65 to 70 dBZs out there, so they're pretty strong. And a lot of moisture over Florida right now, getting a lot of showers and thunderstorms. At this point, there's nothing severe at this point. They do have a marginal risk in effect, but there's nothing severe currently. All right, let's take a look at the severe weather analysis for today. For the rest of the day, we do have a large area of thunderstorms potential. There is a marginal risk of severe thunderstorms out here in the panhandle of Nebraska, but I don't think a lot's going to happen at this point in time. There's just not a lot of moisture up there. But again, thunderstorms will probably begin to form out here a little bit later today. Again, we got those thunderstorm activity off the Gulf Coast here that will be moving onshore into New Orleans. Again, I think these storms are going to punch a little bit more of a punch to them than what we've had recorded here. So we may have a few isolated severe weather events take place along the Gulf Coast. And then we have that marginal risk over here over the southern two-thirds of Florida here just south of Tampa. There's some pretty powerful storms that are moving into the Fort Pierce and Miami areas. However, tomorrow is going to be the bigger day that everybody's talking about, and what people are wondering how big of a day it's going to be, and we'll look at that a little bit closer. But day two tomorrow, we've got a pretty large, slight risk of severe thunderstorms all the way extending to central Iowa down to the Gulf Coast, and from portions of central Oklahoma all the way over towards around Memphis, Tennessee. So a large area under the gun in the warm sector for potential severe weather. And a marginal risk surrounding that area and a large area of general thunderstorms elsewhere. Looking at day three, that risk gets shunted down towards the southeastern portion of the United States, covering most of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and some portions of Georgia. And then a marginal risk extends all the way up into portions of southern Michigan, covers most of Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and expands out towards the Atlantic coast there. We're going to take a look at the details of this in just a few minutes, but let's look at the current winds aloft. Looking at 925 millibars at 18Z today. We have a very strong low-level jet forming out here in the Central Plains from Kansas to Nebraska and South Dakota here. Winds gusting between 35 and 40 knots coming off the Gulf of Mexico. Not a lot of moisture right now at this point, but it is very strong. Just something to keep an eye on. The jet at 850 millibar again increases. Winds here now between, I would say roughly between 35 and 45 knots. Again, just pretty much covering most of the Central Plains. Now looking up at 700 millibar level, we have, you can see our upper level low out here around just a little bit southwest of Salt Lake City. Several components of jet stream components moving through the southern portion around that low pressure system into the Central Plains. Again, the wind's pretty much unidirectional here at this time, as this low's still pretty much out in the southwestern portion of the United States. Looking at 500 millibars, this low is a little bit stronger here. Very deep trough, a very deep jet stream around that low pressure system, with winds ranging anywhere from 80 to possibly 95 knots over Arizona. The flow beginning to form out here across Colorado, so we'll see a lot of snow begin to increase in that region there as time goes on over the next 12 to 24 hours. And then looking at the 300 millibar level, very powerful winds here, gust up to between 135 to 140 knots, centered pretty much over Flagstaff, Arizona. The deep stacked upper level low sitting over not Nebraska, but Nevada and Utah at this point in time. Quite a large area of diffluent flow aloft that will be moving into the Central Plains. So that's going to be quite key as we get to as we move forward in the next 24 to 36 hours. Looking at the aviation weather for today, we do have a few scattered areas of convection around the United States. We have those thunderstorms over Florida at this point in time. Some scattered thunderstorms with tops up to 36 to 42,000 feet across portions of Louisiana. Some thunderstorms like we noticed on radar there around Sioux Falls, South Dakota, tops up to 37,000 feet, and then some basic convective outlooks in effect for portions of the Intermountain West, Central Plains, and along the Gulf Coast region. Looking at turbulence, we have moderate turbulence segment in effect from the surface to 18,000 feet for very strong winds at the surface, up to about 18,000 feet. We saw that in the jet stream map. And looking at the icing at this point in time, no icing segments in effect across the United States. All right, let's take a look at our 5 day outlook here, and let's take a look at what's going to happen over the weather next 5 days. And looking at today at 18Z, again, we've got that strong upper level low. This makes a lot of sense. A lot of energy wrapping around this low pressure system. A lot of it's pretty tight right now, so not a lot of that energy is moving into the central plain. So that's the reason why we don't think there's going to be a lot of thunderstorm activity right now at this point. But there'll be some pockets of jet stream energy that moves out into there. So we'll see some thunderstorms being enhanced by that in isolated spots. Looking at the surface chart, this low pressure system I think is a little bit further to the southwest here than what the models are showing at this point in time. And pressure that I saw was at 999 millibars. So this is showing a little bit more lower concentration. It's not quite at that level yet, but we do show a strong southerly flow off the Gulf of Mexico. Problem is we have a lot of dry air here. There's not been a lot of rain out this year in this region, so it's going to take a little bit of time to moisten up this atmosphere, especially in the warm sector, and so it's gonna we'll start to see some scattered showers and thunderstorms break out. A lot of them will be isolated, but most of the activity is going to be on the back side of the surface low out here in the Intermountain West with snow and rain and so forth. Now, looking at tomorrow, Wednesday, now this is when the slight risk is in effect, and I think right now at this point the slight risk is a good forecast. Um, we see this trough begin to kind of shear out a little bit. It's not quite as potent. Two pockets of energy. One pocket of energy is now moving into Nebraska. It's more of a positive tilt, though it is a closed low, so it's more progressive according to this model here. And most of the models are pretty much leaning this way, so we're not coming in with the strong negative tilt to trough into the central plains. That's one thing that's going against it. The other thing is we got energy laying off to the back here. So we might get some more energy swing around. So we're going to have to watch this closely here. Not a lot of energy out there out in front of it around 18Z tomorrow when they're showing the height of this potential severe weather. So, it's going to be quite iffy to see what happens here. Looking at the surface chart, we do have about a sub 1,000 millibar low pressure system sitting over Nebraska. Blizzard conditions pretty much over, just north of Denver, probably near the Denver area, as well as in Wyoming. They'll be getting hit, then mostly rain above that associated with the warm front. And then in the warm sector, we'll begin to see showers and thunderstorms begin to break out. I think later in the day, there may be, they were talking about showers and thunderstorms developing later today. This might be some stuff that's left over from the morning. We'll see how that takes place. I mean, we'll probably see some energy, but I think a lot of the energy is still kind of holding back. We'll just have to monitor this. I think that what's going to be key here tomorrow, and is as we look at the additional parameters here, and we'll see how they all fit into place here. So let's look at the dew points for tomorrow at 18Z. We're seeing a pretty strong tongue of dew points of 60 plus degrees Fahrenheit air, all the way up to just northwest of Kansas City, Missouri tomorrow, with a deep axis. I think this is going to be a little overdone at this point in time. Yes, there'll be a strong jet max, low-level jet at this point in time, but I don't think we're going to be quite. I think the 60-degree heights will probably make it up to about maybe Topeka, Kansas, or just south of Topeka, Kansas, maybe Wichita area and that area. And I think these are not going to be quite as high tomorrow. We will have a pretty potent dry line out here because we've got a lot of dry air that's going to be coming out of the mountains and along the panhandles and so forth. So the dry line I expect to light up pretty good tomorrow, but when it happens and how it happens, let's look at a couple of other parameters. This is the Cape values over here on the right-hand side. And Cape values here kind of ranging between 1,000 and 1,500 joules per kilogram. I think this is going to be a little bit lower here at this point, about 18Z. This seems a little crazy for me here. I don't know if they'll be that high. I think moisture is going to be a little bit more limited, so I would expect this to be a little bit lower. So I think the GFS is kind of overdoing the instability at this point. Looking at the wind flow aloft and at the surface, near the surface, about 920 925 millibars. I like looking at this level. We do have a strong low-level jet from around Oklahoma City all the way up to about Kansas City, Missouri, with winds gusting between 35 and 40 knots, maybe a few 45 knot wind gusts in there. But as you can see, it's pretty far displaced. It's not like we're getting this strong jet right out of the Gulf of Mexico. It's still pretty far north, so it's not picking up that moisture level that the models keep saying it's going to be picking up. The other thing here is we look at compare the surface level. It's according to this, it's getting vertically stacked out here in portions of Nebraska here. Here you've got the surface low, or near the surface low, around 925 millibars out here, and you've got these mid-level low out here in the same area. The problem is we've got this jet that's very close to this surface low. Again, because it's more narrow and compact and it's positively tilted, the jet stream is more close into the low, and therefore it's not out where it's not being pushed out like with a negative tilted trough, pushed out way ahead of the low, and not quite on top of the low-level jet. So you've got a big displacement here. And these winds here, are gusting to 80 to 90 knots. So our shear aloft and in between is kind of messed up at this point in time. It's not really super strong, and if anything, it's going to be the right rear exit region that's going to be coming in later in that afternoon. That's going to probably produce the tornadoes, or not tornadoes, just tornadoes, but severe weather later on. So it's kind of disjointed according to what the models have at this point. So if we're going strictly by the models, I would not say it's a done deal yet. Where we saw some other situations, a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, we saw a little bit better conditions, but yet we didn't have quite the severe weather. So this is not quite as, cookie cutter as this classic severe weather event. So, it's hard to judge on this. We're going to have to really look at the parameters once we get there. Looking at the storm relative helicity, again, storm relative helicity is way off from the low-level jet here, and where the moist axis is, or the instability axis is. So, again, we're not, even though we're seeing relative felicities values between 100 and 150, yeah, that's sufficient for severe weather and rotating storms, but it's not crazy. You know what I'm saying? Now we go over here to the EHI values. Again, EHI values, they're ranging between 1 and 1.5 units. I think that's valid, but again, I don't think it's crazy. It's not off the chart here. So I think what the models are trying to show us here is that it's having a hard time trying to place this storm together. If you look at the mid-level aspect of this storm and the upper levels aspect of this storm, if it shears out like what it's forecasting it to do, then yeah, I think they'll probably get as best as a slight risk. Now that doesn't mean thunderstorms that form are going to be really weak, but they could be really strong once they do form. But I don't think we're going to have a high concentration of severe weather tomorrow. So especially with the energy kind of folding back into the southwestern portion of the United States. So now let's take a look at Thursday, and we're not going to get really detailed in here on the severe weather parameters because we want to focus mostly on Wednesday. But here we see the upper level low at 500 millibars shearing out. We have some more energy coming out behind it that'll kind of enhance it down the road. That's going to be and then we have this upper level low of energy that's way up here in Canada that's going to be ushering in some very cold air later in the week. And then we have this upper level energy still sitting out here around southwest Arizona. So again, because of that, this storm system to be progressive and moving fast, and I don't think we're going to have the parameters come together as quickly and dynamically as we could if the storm was a little bit slower and more tilted to the negative or neutral. At the surface level, the surface low is very potent. It's at 988 millibars over Michigan. So we'll have a lot of showers and thunderstorms out ahead of the cold front, snow up above it near blizzard conditions, and still snow out here into the central plain, north central plains and the north central portions of the Intermountain West. But again, because the storm system's more progressive, I think we'll see severe weather, but it's not going to be a huge outbreak. And again, we're going to have to watch what happens along the Gulf of Mexico. It may be very similar to last week when we get a lot of storms that blow up out here in the Gulf, because that's where the more rich and unstable atmosphere is, and it kind of chokes off the inflow off the Gulf there. Looking at Friday, the upper level low out here around Arizona just slowly progresses a little bit as it's more cut off from the flow. The flow over the northern portion of the United States becomes more northwesterly as pretty cold air begins to come in. Now, in the past, last week we were looking at a pretty hefty duty cold snap coming up. A lot of the charts now are showing that a lot of this cold is going to be kind of shunted off towards the northeast pretty rapidly. So it is going to get cold. It's going to be quite cool air that's coming down. We're going to see some quite large departures here, but it's not going to be as severe as I think it was looking earlier. High pressure pretty much blocks the weather off the west coast. It's going to remain dry and clear for the next couple of days. Looking at the surface, that storm system races off towards the northeast and pretty much just a broken front along the eastern coast with showers and thunderstorms, but nothing too crazy at this point in time. Moving along to Saturday, that upper level low over New Mexico and southwestern Texas is kind of stalling out a little bit, not really being cut off, but it's also beginning to weaken quite a bit, so not a lot of activity associated with that. More energy comes out of Canada across the upper Great Lakes. Could see a pretty good clipper moving in there and some enhanced snow. As we look into the surface chart, we could see some good lake effect snows take place there as this clipper comes down. It's a potent little storm system that's coming down according to the charts here. And again, that front begins to wash out along the Gulf of Mexico as it pushes a little bit further to the south, and some moisture beginning to feed back to the north with southeasterly flow into West Texas here. Looking at Sunday, high pressure dominates across the western portion of the United States, so it remains pretty dry and toasty as it begins to increase in temperature there. Winds become a little bit more zonal flow in nature, so not quite as cold air, but most of it's located in the northeastern portion of the United States as a pretty strong upper level low forms out there off the Atlantic coast there. Most of it should miss the northeastern portion of the United States, but it's going to be quite windy and raw across most of Maine on Sunday. The front that was out here is kind of falling apart. We might see a little bit of a surface low form out here in the Gulf of Mexico that might produce some weather later on for Florida, but generally across the United States it's mostly dry and warming up. So in summary, at this point in time, we do have a potential for severe weather on Wednesday and possibly Thursday, but I think the conditions right now are kind of up in the air, and we're going to have to look at those as we get closer. It's not a clear-cut deal. Once that moves out, though, we're going to see a lot cooler temperatures in the east and warming in the west. So we want to thank you for paying attention to us and watching us. We will keep you advised about the weather tomorrow. We ask that you watch us in the morning as we will take a look at what the weather conditions are and let you know what the potential for severe weather later that day is. Thank you and have a great day.